You bleed for your kids, you empty your bank accounts, sacrifice your sleep, and swallow your pride. And sometimes they thank you by looking their millionaire fiancé dead in the eye and calling you a deadbeat. So, I didn't get mad. I got my bank statements. The steak cost $90. It was dry-aged, bone-in ribeye, resting on a bed of truffle mash. It tasted like wet cardboard. I was sitting in a booth at Le Petit Chien, a restaurant where the menus don't have prices and the waiters look like they're judging your credit score. Across from me sat my daughter, Chloe. Beside her sat Preston. Preston was 32, wore a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than my first mortgage, and ran a logistics firm his father had handed him. He was a good-looking kid, in that polished, aggressive way that wealth buys. Perfect teeth, hair that never moved. He was paying for dinner. He made sure I knew it without explicitly saying it. "So, Tom," Preston said, swirling his Cabernet. He didn't call me Mr. Miller. He called me Tom. It was a subtle power play, establishing that while I was the father of the bride, he was the man of the hour. "Chloe tells me you're working over at the municipal plant now. Supervisor, right?" 30 years, I said, putting my fork down. Started turning wrenches, now I watch other guys turn wrenches. It pays the bills. Chloe smiled. It was a tight, practiced expression. The kind of smile she used to give me when she was 16 and had just backed my truck into the mailbox. "Dad works very hard, Preston. He always has." Preston nodded slowly, his eyes drifting from me to Chloe, filled with a sickeningly sweet sort of pity. He reached over and placed his hand over hers. "I know, and I respect that. I really do. It takes a lot to step up later in life." I stopped chewing. The restaurant noise, the clinking of crystal, the low murmur of moneyed conversations seemed to drop out completely. "Step up later in life?" I repeated, keeping my voice perfectly level. Chloe's foot nudged mine under the table. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a sharp, frantic kick. Preston offered a magnanimous, forgiving smile. The smile of a man who goes to charity galas and buys absolution for $10,000 a plate. "Look, Tom, Chloe's been incredibly open with me about her childhood. We don't have secrets. I know things were difficult. I know you weren't in the picture much, but I just want to say, man to man, I think it's great you're trying to make amends now. Being here for the wedding, reconnecting. It means a lot to her." I looked at Chloe. She was staring intently at her half-eaten sea bass. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her napkin. A faint flush of red was creeping up her neck, disappearing into the collar of the silk blouse I had bought her for her birthday 3 months ago. "Not in the picture much." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I was the one who had stayed up until 3 in the morning helping her build a papier-mâché volcano in the 4th grade. I was the one who worked double shifts at the plant to cover the gap when her mother walked out on us to find herself in New Mexico. I was the one who sat in the freezing rain on metal bleachers for every single track meet, every cheer competition, every agonizing middle school band concert. I didn't blink. I didn't yell. Decades of working in a heavy machinery plant teaches you how to compartmentalize an explosion. You don't panic. You locate the shut-off valve. "Is that right?" I asked softly, my eyes fixed on my daughter. "Not in the picture." Preston chuckled, a low, smooth sound, clearly misinterpreting my silence as shame. "Hey, water under the bridge, Tom. I'm not here to judge. My own old man was a workaholic. We all have our flaws. The important thing is that Chloe survived it. She put herself through school. She built her own life. She's a survivor. And now, she's going to be my wife. I just wanted to clear the air. No bad blood." "She put herself through school," I echoed. My voice sounded detached, like it was coming from someone else. "Every penny," Preston said proudly, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. "Working nights, taking out loans. She's incredible. I'm taking care of her now, though. She'll never have to scrape by again." Chloe finally looked up. Her eyes met mine. They were wide, pleading. "Please," her expression said. "Just let it go. Just play along." She had constructed a narrative. To snag Preston, the golden boy with a savior complex, she needed to be a Cinderella, a scrappy, self-made girl who clawed her way out of poverty and neglect. A girl who had to raise herself because her mother vanished and her father was a deadbeat who drank his paycheck and left her to fend for herself. It was a brilliant story. It hit all the right demographic notes for a guy like Preston, who desperately wanted to feel like a white knight rescuing a maiden from the dirt. There was only one problem. It was a complete, unadulterated, psychotic lie. I reached for my water glass. Condensation dripped onto the white linen tablecloth. I took a slow sip. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It wasn't the frantic pulse of anger. It was the cold, steady thud of absolute betrayal. Kids drain you. Not just your wallet, but your soul. You give them pieces of yourself, chunk by chunk, year by year, until there's barely anything left of the man you were before they arrived. You do it willingly. You do it because that's the job. But sitting across from her fiancé, listening to him praise her resilience in the face of my supposed abandonment, I realized love was a one-way street, and I had just run out of gas. "Well," I said, wiping my mouth with my napkin and placing it carefully beside my plate, "it's wonderful that you're taking care of her, Preston. She certainly deserves everything she has coming to her." Preston smiled, satisfied. "Exactly. Now, about the wedding logistics." I let him talk. I sat there for another 45 minutes, nodding at the appropriate times, smiling when required. I watched my daughter play the role of the demure, damaged survivor. I watched her order a $20 cocktail and charge it to Preston's American Express. When the dinner finally ended, Preston shook my hand firmly in the valet line. Chloe gave me a quick, tense hug. "Thanks for coming, Dad," she whispered in my ear. "I'll call you. Drive safe," I said. I watched his matte black Porsche Cayenne pull away from the curb, merging into the downtown traffic. I walked 3 blocks to the parking garage where I had left my 10-year-old Ford F-150. I climbed inside, shut the door, and sat in the dark. The smell of stale coffee and old leather surrounded me. I didn't cry. You'd think I would, but the tears weren't there. Instead, there was a profound, icy clarity. She wanted a deadbeat. She wanted the tragedy. She wanted the aesthetic of the struggle without ever having to actually live through it. I put the keys in the ignition. The engine roared to life with a familiar, reassuring rumble. I pulled out of the garage and headed home to the suburbs. I had a lot of work to do. My house was quiet when I walked in. It had been quiet for a long time. Ever since Chloe moved out 3 years ago, the silence had settled into the drywall. I walked straight past the kitchen, past the living room with the framed photos of Chloe's high school graduation, and down the hall to my home office. It wasn't much of an office, just a spare bedroom with a cheap particle board desk and a bulky gray filing cabinet in the corner. I turned on the desk lamp. It cast a harsh yellow circle of light over the cluttered surface. I booted up my laptop, an old Dell that whirred loudly in protest. She put herself through school. Every penny. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. The metal runners screeched. This was where I kept the permanent records, tax returns, deeds, and a thick manila folder labeled Chloe College Expenses. I pulled it out and dropped it on the desk. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. I opened the flap. Inside were years of bank statements, tuition receipts, lease agreements, and auto repair bills. I didn't just keep digital records. I was old-fashioned. I liked paper. Paper doesn't lie. Paper doesn't crash. I spent the next 3 hours pulling the thread, unraveling the beautiful tapestry of bullshit my daughter had woven for her future husband. First, the tuition. Chloe had insisted on going to a private liberal arts college out of state. The local university wasn't aesthetic enough. It didn't have the right vibe. I had argued. I had begged her to do 2 years at community college first. She threw a fit, cried for a week, and told me I was ruining her future. So I took out a second mortgage. I pulled the receipts. The bursar's office statements from Emerson College, $45,000 a year. My name was at the top of every single wire transfer. I highlighted the totals in bright yellow marker. I flipped through the pages, semester after semester. Not a single loan in her name. Not a single night shift worked. Next, the rent. After her sophomore year, the dorms were too noisy and suffocating. She needed her own space to focus on her communications degree. I dug out the lease agreement for the 2-bedroom loft she had rented with her friend in downtown Boston. Guarantor, Thomas Miller. Monthly rent, $2,800. I pulled up my Chase checking account online and printed out the continuous, unbroken line of monthly transfers labeled Chloe Rent, Living. My eyes burned from the screen, but I couldn't stop. It was a masochistic exercise, forcing myself to look at the raw data of my own exploitation. Working nights, scraping by. I printed out her credit card statements. She was an authorized user on my visa. I had given it to her for emergencies only. I read the emergencies. Sephora, $342.18. Lululemon, $195. Oasis Medical Spa, $850. Coachella VIP Pass, $1,2. Zero. Month after month, year after year, I had paid it. I grumbled, I complained, I threatened to cut her off, but I always paid it, because she was my daughter, because her mother was gone, and I was terrified that if I didn't give her everything she wanted, she would leave me too. It was pathetic, really. Looking at the numbers, I realized I hadn't been a father for the last 10 years. I had been a host organism, and then there was the car. During her junior year, she had totaled the reliable, sensible Honda Civic. I bought her for high school graduation. She ran a red light while texting. I had to fly up, deal with the police, pay the tow yard, and sort out the insurance. She was unharmed, thank God. But she needed a car. She couldn't possibly drive another used car. She had an internship at a PR firm. She needed to project an image. I found the dealership paperwork for the 2021 Audi A4, financed in my name. The down payment, $10,000, came straight out of the $401k withdrawal I had taken the penalty on. I printed the loan statements, showing the $650 monthly payment automatically drafted from my account. By 3 a.m., my desk was covered in paper. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my temples. My head was pounding. The sheer volume of the sacrifice was staggering, even to me. When you're living it, paying one bill at a time, you don't realize the gravity of it. You just keep your head down and shovel the coal. But seeing it all laid out at once, the hundreds of thousands of dollars, the sacrificed retirements, the vacations never taken, the clothes never bought for myself, it was nauseating. I didn't own a boat. I didn't golf. I bought my work boots at Walmart. I drove a truck that burned oil. All so Chloe could play the role of a distressed princess for a millionaire who thought he was rescuing her from the gutter. I grabbed a fresh, empty binder from the closet. It was thick, with clear plastic sleeves. I began organizing the paperwork. Section 1, college tuition and housing. Section 2, the Audi and insurance. Section 3, the emergency credit card. Section 4, the study abroad trip to Florence, which cost $12,000 and yielded exactly 3 transferable credits. I worked methodically. I slid the highlighted bank statements into the plastic sleeves. I made sure the dates were clear. I made sure my name was bold and visible on every single page. I wasn't just compiling a scrapbook. I was building a prosecution brief. When I finished, I closed the binder. It was an inch thick. The cover was plain black. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself 3 fingers of cheap bourbon into a glass. I drank it neat. It burned going down, a hot, welcome distraction from the cold knot in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and found Preston's number. He had texted me earlier in the week about the rehearsal dinner menu. I typed out a message. Preston, enjoyed dinner tonight. Realized we didn't get to finish our conversation about the wedding finances. I have some documents regarding Chloe's background that you need to see before you pay for anything else. Let's do brunch on Sunday. Just the 3 of us. My treat. I hit send before I could second guess myself. The reply came 3 minutes later. Preston was apparently a night owl. Sounds great, Tom. The club at 11? See you then. I locked my phone, set it on the counter, and stared out the kitchen window into the dark backyard. You wanted a deadbeat, Chloe. You're about to find out exactly what one looks like. Sunday morning at the Oak Ridge Country Club felt like stepping onto a movie set where everyone was paid to pretend they didn't have problems. The grass was an unnatural, aggressively vibrant green. The patio overlooking the 18th hole was crowded with men in pastel polos and women wearing oversized sunglasses. I walked in wearing a pair of clean Levi's, a button-down shirt that I had ironed myself, and my steel-toed boots, because they were the only decent shoes I owned. I stuck out like a rusty nail on a marble floor. I had the black binder tucked under my arm. The hostess, a girl no older than Chloe, looked me up and down with polite confusion before I gave her Preston's name. Her demeanor instantly shifted to deferential grace. Right this way, sir. Preston and Chloe were already seated at a table near the edge of the patio, shaded by a large white umbrella. Preston was wearing a linen shirt, unbuttoned to the collarbone. Chloe looked flawless in a breezy sundress, sipping a mimosa. When she saw me, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She hadn't expected me to actually take Preston up on a meeting. She thought the dinner at the steakhouse was the end of it. Tom, Preston stood up, extending a hand. Glad you could make it. The valet take care of your truck, all right? They figured it out, I said, shaking his hand and taking a seat. I placed the black binder flat on the table, right next to the basket of artisanal pastries. Chloe eyed the binder. What's that, Dad? She asked, her voice light, airy, too airy. Just some paperwork, I said casually. Financials. Preston chuckled, signaling a waiter for coffee. Tom, I told you, you don't need to worry about the wedding costs. I know you're not in a position to contribute, and frankly, I wouldn't ask you to. Chloe and I are handling it. It's fully covered. I appreciate that, Preston, I said. The waiter poured my coffee. Black. I took a sip. It was excellent coffee. But this isn't about the catering or the floral arrangements. You mentioned at dinner that Chloe paid her own way through life, that she had to scrape by because I wasn't in the picture. Chloe's posture went rigid. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might actually faint. Dad, she warned, her voice dropping an octave. Don't what, sweetheart? I asked mildly. I looked back at Preston. He was frowning slightly, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The protective fiancé instinct was kicking in. Tom, if this is about what I said at dinner, Preston started, raising his hands in a placating gesture. I apologize if I offended you. I know it's a sensitive subject. I just value honesty. Chloe's past made her who she is. I agree, I said. Honesty is crucial, especially before you sign a marriage license. You're a businessman, Preston. Logistics. You deal in supply chains, inventory, cold hard facts. Right? I do, Preston said slowly, his eyes dropping to the black binder. Then you know the danger of bad data, I said. I placed my hand on the cover of the binder. You're operating under the assumption that you are marrying a woman who survived poverty, neglect, and a deadbeat father. You think you're rescuing her. You think her financial habits, whatever they may be, are a result of trauma. Dad, stop, Chloe hissed, leaning across the table. Her manicured nails dug into the tablecloth. Preston, let's go. He's just trying to cause trouble, because he's embarrassed. Preston didn't move. He looked at Chloe, then at me. Embarrassed about what? About the truth, I said. I flipped the binder open. Page 1. The highlighted bank statements from Emerson College. I spun the binder around so it faced Preston. I slid it across the table. Let's look at the supply chain, I said, my voice barely above a conversational hum. Page 1. Emerson College tuition, $45,000 a year. You'll notice the remitter name on the wire transfers. Thomas Miller. No student loans, no financial aid. Fully funded by the deadbeat sitting across from you. Preston stared at the page. He frowned. his eyes scanning the yellow highlights. He reached out and touched the paper, as if checking to see if it was real. "What is this?" Preston asked, his voice losing its breezy country club confidence. "Keep turning," I instructed. Chloe lunged for the binder. "Give me that." Preston caught her wrist. It wasn't a violent movement, but it was firm. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the pages. "Hold on, Chloe. Let him finish." I watched my daughter sink back into her chair. The panicked, cornered animal look in her eyes was something I had never seen before. She was utterly terrified. Preston turned the page. "Section 2, I narrated, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. "Downtown Boston loft. 2 years. $2,800 a month. Paid in full. By me." You'll see the corresponding withdrawals from my Chase account. You might also notice the receipts in the back of that section for the West Elm furniture she needed to decorate it. Preston was silent. The only sound was the rustle of the heavy stock paper as he turned the pages. "Section 3. I continued, relentless. The icy clarity from the other night was back, freezing out any residual fatherly guilt. The 2021 Audi A4. She told you she bought that used off a lot, right? Saved up her tips from bartending?" Preston didn't answer. He was staring at the loan origination document. "Down payment came from my 401k, I said. Monthly payments drafted from my checking account. I paid the insurance too. Full coverage. You know, because she totaled her first car texting." "Preston, he's taking things out of context," Chloe said, her voice shaking. Tears were pooling in her eyes. He forced me to take that money. He used it to control me. He was never there emotionally, so he just threw money at me to make up for it. It was a brilliant pivot. Even in the face of insurmountable evidence, she was trying to rewrite the narrative in real time. If I wasn't financially negligent, I was emotionally abusive. Preston looked up from the binder. He looked at Chloe. The pity was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by the cold, calculating look of a man analyzing a bad contract. "He forced you to take it?" Preston asked quietly. "Yes," Chloe cried, a single tear rolling down her perfectly powdered cheek. "He's toxic, Preston. I lied about the money because I was ashamed of how he treated me. I didn't want you to know how messed up my family was." Preston looked back at me. He was waiting for my defense. I didn't give him one. I just pointed at the binder. "Turn to section 4, I said. Preston flipped the heavy divider tab. "The toxic emotional control," I said dryly. "Credit card statements. Authorized user on my account. Highlighted charges for Coachella VIP tickets. Highlights for 3 different medical spas. Over $400 at Sephora in a single afternoon. If this was control, it was the most luxurious prison in human history." Preston traced his finger down the line items, his jaw clenched tight. "And finally," I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the table, "the coup de grace. Turn to the back. The loose papers in the sleeve." Preston flipped to the very back of the binder. He pulled out a printed email thread. "What's this?" he asked. "That is an email from 3 months ago," I said. "Around the time you two got engaged. Chloe emailed me asking for $15,000 for a business venture. She wanted to start before she got married. I told her I didn't have it, because I didn't. I'm tapped out. I'm broke, Preston." I looked at Chloe. She was staring at the table. Her face flushed a deep, mottled red. "Read her response," I told Preston. Preston cleared his throat and read aloud, his voice flat. "If you can't even help your own daughter get her life started, then don't bother coming to the wedding. You've always been useless when it counts." Preston stopped reading. He set the paper back into the binder and closed it gently. He pressed his hands flat against the black plastic cover. He didn't look at Chloe. He stared out over the manicured lawn of the golf course, watching a distant cart roll over a hill. The silence at the table was heavier than the summer humidity. "You told me," Preston finally spoke, his voice dangerously soft, addressing Chloe without looking at her, that you had $30,000 in student debt. That's why I paid off your credit cards last month, so you could focus on paying down the student loans. I raised an eyebrow. That was new information to me. She was double dipping. Chloe swallowed hard. Preston, Where did that money go, Chloe? Preston asked, finally turning his head to look at her. The golden boy wasn't smiling anymore. If your dad paid for college, if you have no student loans, where did the $30,000 I gave you go? Chloe's mouth opened, but no words came out. The aesthetic of the scrappy survivor had completely evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, exposed girl who had run out of runway. I stood up from the table. I grabbed my half-empty coffee cup and finished it in one gulp. The binder is yours, Preston, I said, tapping the cover. Keep it. Consider it an early wedding gift, a complete inventory of the asset you're acquiring. I looked at my daughter one last time. I expected to feel triumph. I expected to feel vindicated. But as I looked at her pale face and trembling hands, I didn't feel anything at all, just an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. Have a good life, Chloe, I said. I turned my back on the umbrella, the mimosas, and the $90 steaks, and started walking toward the parking lot to find my truck. The drive home was a blur of highway lines and static from the radio. I gripped the steering wheel of the F-150 until my knuckles ached, bracing for the inevitable explosion. I expected a barrage of venomous texts. I expected the phone to vibrate right off the passenger seat. Nothing. Absolute silence. It lasted for 3 days. 3 days of going to the plant, eating microwave dinners, and watching the evening news in my quiet living room. Tuesday and Wednesday passed with agonizing slowness. I was on the floor at the municipal plant, overseeing the maintenance of the city's primary water pumps. The work is loud, dangerous, and completely unforgiving. If a valve fails, millions of gallons of water go exactly where they aren't supposed to. There's no PR spin for a blown gasket. The iron either holds or it breaks. I found a deep, grounding comfort in that brutal honesty. It was the exact opposite of the world my daughter inhabited. Then, on Wednesday night, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The caller ID glowed in the dim room. Preston. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. Tom, he said. His voice lacked the smooth country club polish it had on Sunday. It was clipped, professional, like a man canceling a vendor contract. Preston. Everything all right. The wedding is off. I leaned back into my recliner. The faux leather groaned beneath my weight. I didn't feel a rush of victory, and I certainly didn't feel joy. I just felt tired. I see. I hired a forensic accountant on Monday, Preston continued, his tone perfectly flat. A guy my logistics firm uses for corporate mergers. I gave him the binder, and I gave him the digital bank statements Chloe provided me when we moved in together. She doctored them, Tom. She altered the PDFs before she sent them to me to hide the massive transfers you were making. But it gets worse. He paused. I heard the clinking of ice in a glass on his end. That $30,000 I gave her to wipe out her student loans, Preston said, a cold edge creeping into his voice. She funneled it into a private brokerage account. She was building a nest egg with my money while living off yours. She thought if we ever divorced, she'd have an untraceable exit fund. I closed my eyes. The sheer audacity of the grift was staggering. She always had a good imagination. She didn't just lie to me about you, Preston said. She lied about everything. Her credit score, her debt, her job history. She told me she was a senior VP at her PR firm. She's a junior social media coordinator. She makes $42,000 a year. I appreciate you letting me know, I said. I appreciate you bringing me the documents, Preston replied. It saved me a very expensive divorce down the line. If you ever need a reference, or whatever it is you need in your line of work, let me know. He hung up. Just like that, the transaction was complete. The golden boy had cut his losses. The real fallout came on Friday evening. I was out in the driveway, changing the oil in the truck. The evening air was thick with humidity and the smell of raw exhaust. I had a heavy wrench in one hand and a grease-stained shop rag in the other when a white Uber pulled up to the curb. It didn't park. The driver took one look at his passenger's face, popped the electronic locks, and sped off the exact second her feet hit the pavement. Chloe marched up the driveway. She was carrying a single, oversized designer duffel bag. She looked awful. Her hair, usually blown out into perfect, expensive waves, was tied in a messy, chaotic knot. She wore baggy sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. The refined country club aesthetic was dead and buried. She didn't look sad. She looked rabid. "Are you happy now?" she screamed. Her voice echoed off the aluminum siding of my garage, sharp and hysterical. "Did you get what you wanted?" I wiped my hands on the rag, taking my time. I didn't step toward her. I didn't flinch. "I wanted you to stop lying." "He dumped me," she shrieked, throwing her hands in the air, dropping the heavy duffel bag onto the concrete. "He took the ring back. He kicked me out of the condo. I have nowhere to go. I have nothing." "You have your PR job," I said evenly. "You have your degree."
"That pays nothing."
She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at my chest. A neighbor's porch light flicked on 2 houses down. She didn't care. "You ruined my life. You couldn't stand to see me succeed. You couldn't stand that I was going to have a life you could never afford. So you sabotaged it." I stared at her. I searched her face for any trace of the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest while watching Saturday morning cartoons. I looked for an ounce of guilt, a flicker of self-awareness, a moment of genuine remorse for the financial wreckage she had left in her wake. There was nothing, just the pure, unadulterated entitlement of a parasite furious that the host had cut off the blood supply. She genuinely believed she was the victim. "I didn't sabotage anything, Chloe. I handed the man your receipts. If your life was ruined by your own bank statements, that's your fault." "He was going to take care of me," she cried, stepping closer, her face flushed red with rage. "I had it all figured out. You just had to sit there and keep your mouth shut. You owe me a place to stay. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," I interrupted. My voice was quiet, but it hit her like a physical blow, stopping her dead in her tracks. "I paid my debt, Chloe. I paid for the college. I paid for the cars. I paid for the clothes. I bought your childhood, and I bought your 20s. The bank is closed." She stared at me, her chest heaving. She was waiting for me to cave. She was waiting for the ingrained, paternal guilt to wash over me, for the inevitable moment where I would apologize for upsetting her, pick up her bags, and open my door. I turned my back to her, walked into the garage, and hit the button for the automatic door. The motor hummed to life. The heavy metal panels began to roll down. I watched her legs through the descending gap, standing frozen on the concrete, until the door hit the ground with a heavy final thud. August 14th came and went. That was supposed to be the wedding day. I didn't spend it drinking. I didn't spend it looking at old photo albums or wallowing in nostalgia. I picked up a 12-hour Saturday overtime shift at the plant. The plant was deafening. The hydraulic presses slammed with a violent rhythm you could feel rattling your teeth. The air tasted of ozone, hot metal, and industrial grease. I liked the work. I liked the physical exhaustion that left no room for overthinking. Down here, nobody lied. Machines didn't care about your aesthetic or your sob stories. And for the first time in 10 years, the paycheck I took home on Friday actually belonged to me. The financial recovery was slow, but it was incredibly tangible. I drove to the dealership where we had bought the Audi. I didn't negotiate. I handed them the keys, sold the car back at a massive loss, and paid off the remaining loan balance with the last of my meager savings. It wiped out my safety net completely, but the account was officially closed. The aggressive monthly draft was terminated. The bleeding had finally stopped. Without the auto drafts, without the emergency credit card bills, and the random requests for cash, my checking account started to actually hold water. The balance crept up, dollar by dollar. I started making small, deliberate changes. I bought premium coffee beans instead of the generic tub. I replaced the dangerously bald tires on the F-150. I hired a local guy to fix the leaky gutters I'd been ignoring for 3 years because I couldn't spare the cash. In late October, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. The handwriting on the envelope was Chloe's elegant, looping cursive. I stood by the mailbox at the end of my driveway, holding the envelope. The autumn wind bit at my face, carrying the sharp scent of dry, falling leaves. I could feel the thickness of the paper through the envelope. It was probably a multi-page letter, maybe a tearful apology, maybe a long list of excuses justifying her behavior, maybe a request for money masked as a desperate desire to reconnect. 10 years ago, I would have torn it open immediately, desperate for any scrap of affection, ready to forgive and forget. I looked at the envelope for a long time. Then, I turned around, walked back up the driveway, stepped into the garage, and dropped the letter directly into the garbage can, without breaking the seal. You can't negotiate with someone who sees you as a resource instead of a person. Any response, even a rejection, is just another form of supply. The only winning move is not to play at all. I walked into the house. It was perfectly quiet. Before the dinner at Le Petit Chien, the silence of the house used to suffocate me. It used to feel like a constant, painful reminder of everything I had lost. My wife walking out, my daughter growing up, moving away, and acting like I didn't exist unless the rent was due. But as I walked into the kitchen and turned on the stove to cook dinner, I realized the silence had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. It was the peaceful silence of a house where nobody was lying, nobody was demanding, and nobody was actively bleeding me dry. I had stopped at the local butcher shop on my way home, not the chain grocery store, but the old guy on 4th Street who still wears a blood-stained apron. I pulled a thick, bone-in ribeye out of the fridge. $22. Premium cut. I seasoned it with coarse salt and cracked black pepper, threw it in a smoking hot cast-iron skillet, and listened to it sear. It tasted infinitely better than the $90 steak. It tasted like freedom. Setting boundaries with family isn't about cruelty, it's about survival. When love is replaced by exploitation, walking away becomes the only honest choice left. Tom learned the hard way that you can't buy respect, and financing a lie only guarantees your own bankruptcy, both emotionally and financially. Have you ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member to save your own sanity? Drop a like, share your story in the comments, and please subscribe for more daily storytelling videos.